Welcome to Shatter.
Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories. You'll get intimacy when I feel like it. That's what she said. Not in a fight, not in a moment of frustration, just calm, flat, deliberate. Then she glanced back down at her phone, thumb scrolling like I hadn't just been cut open in my own kitchen. I stood there maybe 3 seconds. Didn't speak, didn't move, didn't even breathe. Then something unexpected happened. I smiled. Not the kind of smile you give when you're amused. The kind you give when the fog finally lifts and you see everything for what it is. The kind that says the fight is over because it never really started. She wasn't negotiating. She was declaring. And me? I wasn't a husband in that moment. I was background noise. So I walked out. Not angrily. Not slamming doors. Just done, quietly done. She didn't notice. Not then. That night. She climbed into bed like nothing had happened. Rolled away from me. As always. Her back had become my home, and the silence between us had become my lullaby. I didn't lie awake replaying her words. I replayed the years before them. The slow erosion. The way she stopped laughing at my jokes. The way her eyes never lingered anymore. How physical touch had gone from instinct to obligation. Looking back, she'd been saying that sentence for years. She just finally found the words to match it. I didn't sleep because I was hurt. I stayed awake because I was calculating. The next morning, I got up first. Didn't make her coffee. Didn't kiss her forehead. Didn't say a word. Just left the house like a ghost wearing my skin. She thought I was too comfortable to walk. Too loyal to leave. She'd confused my silence for surrender. That was her mistake. From that day forward, I stopped trying. Not in some dramatic, we need to talk kind of way. In the quiet way that creeps in like a draft through a cracked window. No more reaching for her hand on the couch. No more morning texts. No more checking in. At first, I think she liked it. Maybe she thought she'd finally trained me out of needing affection. Maybe she thought this was control, watching someone orbit around you until they finally stop spinning. But when someone stops spinning, they don't stay still. They drift. And I was drifting fast. I started leaving earlier than I needed to, just to avoid the dead air in our mornings. Sat in my car with coffee, breathing like it was the first real breath I'd taken in months. I joined a gym again, not for revenge, not to impress anyone, but to remember what it felt like to pour energy into something that gave back. And yet people noticed. People who weren't her. About a week in, she finally saw the shift. I came home late from the gym, keys in hand. Takeout containers cluttered the counter. She was in a silk robe, Netflix paused, wine in hand, like she'd been setting a scene. "You're late," she said, casual. "Didn't realize we were on a clock," I replied. That was the first crack in her composure. I cleaned up her mess without a word. She followed me into the kitchen. "You okay?" "Better than I've been in a long time." Her eyes searched my face, like she was trying to place the change. But I didn't offer more. Because she didn't know it yet, but I had already started packing, quietly, piece by piece, the life I was going to take with me. She didn't notice it the first day, maybe not even the second. At breakfast, I sat across from her, reading the news on my phone. No good morning. No asking how she slept. No sliding the oat milk across the table for her coffee like I used to. She talked about some work drama, her manager, a canceled meeting, a friend's birthday. I nodded once. Said nothing. It wasn't silence born from anger. It was precision. The kind of silence that sinks under the skin before the other person even knows why it bothers them. That night, I came home late. Not because I had to. Because I wanted to stretch the space between us. The house was dim except for the flicker of the TV. She was on the couch in a robe I hadn't seen in a year, hair curled, wine poured. Netflix menu paused like she'd been waiting. "You're late," she said, like she'd been rehearsing the line. "Didn't realize we were on a clock," I answered, setting my keys down. Her head tilted slightly, a quick scan of my face as if she could read the shift in me. I didn't let her. I cleaned up the takeout containers she'd left on the counter. No sighs, no passive-aggressive comments. Just quiet efficiency. She followed me into the kitchen. "You okay?" "Better than I've been in a long time." I watched her register it. That pause before she looked away told me she heard more in my tone than in my words. The next day, she tried harder. Lipstick before I got home. The table set. Pasta from scratch. A candle flickering between us. I ate. Thanked her, but didn't compliment the meal. When she brushed my fingers across the table, I pulled back as if I hadn't noticed. She froze for a second before covering it with a sip of wine. This was new territory for her. She'd built an identity on controlling the flow of affection, giving it when she wanted, withholding it when she didn't. Now the current had reversed, and she was getting a taste of the same hollow space she'd left me in for years. The shift wasn't just emotional. I started making financial moves too. Subscriptions quietly canceled. Streaming services gone. A small portion of my salary rerouted to an account she couldn't access. Not a dramatic purge, just subtle cuts she wouldn't notice until the absence became inconvenient. That night, I heard her from the living room. Something's wrong with the Netflix account. I didn't answer. Every day after that, I made small, deliberate subtractions. Not enough to trigger an argument. Just enough to let the air between us get colder, heavier. She began texting me during the day, little check-ins, attempts at pulling me back in. I replied with the same precision as my silence. Short, controlled. Enough to keep the conversation alive, but starved. And with each passing day, I saw it, the unease behind her eyes. She had mistaken my quiet for surrender. Now she was learning it was the sound of someone building an exit. Because I wasn't circling her anymore. I was already gone. She just hadn't realized it yet. I could pinpoint the exact moment the unease in her shifted to fear. It wasn't dramatic, no screaming, no tears, but it was there, a flicker in her expression that gave her away. Midday, she called me at work. That alone was unusual. Her voice was soft, almost careful. She said she just wanted to hear my voice. I didn't return the sentiment. I let the silence drag until she filled it with an awkward laugh and a quick goodbye. It wasn't affection she was chasing. It was control. She'd built our marriage on the belief that she could dictate the temperature of the relationship, freeze me out, then thaw me when it suited her. But now the thermostat was in my hands, and she didn't know how to handle it. That night, I came home even later than usual. She was in the living room, dressed like we had dinner reservations, makeup perfect, hair done. We didn't have plans. She suggested a new restaurant she'd been dying to try. I told her I'd already eaten. She covered the disappointment with a tight smile and a maybe tomorrow, but I could see the crack forming. I went upstairs without another word. Over the next week, I kept the pattern going, polite, civil, detached. I was still present, still functional, but no longer hers. Every shared space in the house became neutral territory, no warmth, no ownership. I started tightening the financial screws quietly. More subscriptions gone. Automatic payments rerouted. I even moved a portion of our savings into a separate account she didn't know existed. Not to punish her, just to prepare for a future that wouldn't include her. One night, she discovered the Netflix account had been canceled. She called out from the living room, asking if I knew what happened. I didn't respond. I stayed upstairs, letting the unanswered questions sit in the air like static. The changes bled into every part of her routine. Groceries weren't magically restocked. Her car wasn't filled with gas. Small repairs around the house went untouched. She didn't complain at first, but I could see her struggling to reconcile the absence of the man she'd taken for granted. Then came the first obvious sign of panic. I walked into the laundry room and found her going through my pockets under the guise of folding clothes. She didn't look up when I stepped in. She pretended she hadn't been searching for something. I let her keep pretending. I wanted her to sit with that feeling, the uncertainty she had once used against me. This wasn't revenge. It was a controlled demolition. A quiet dismantling of the role she thought I would always play. And as far as she knew, I was just quieter than usual. What she didn't realize was that silence, in the right hands, is never empty. It's a countdown. I didn't plan to find anything that night. But the opportunity was sitting there, lit up in the dark like an invitation. Her phone was on the kitchen counter, charging, screen unlocked. She was upstairs in the shower. I didn't need to search. I wasn't looking for proof. I'd already accepted the truth. Still, when her notifications popped up, 3 messages from the same name I didn't recognize, I read them. They weren't explicit. No confessions. No photos. Just enough to confirm what I already knew. She had a life that existed entirely outside of me. Jokes I didn't get. Plans I wasn't part of. A tone in her words she hadn't used with me in years. I put the phone back exactly where it was, screen down. I wasn't going to confront her. Not now. Not when I still had work to do. Because here's the thing. If you go to war too early, you give the other side time to prepare. I wasn't going to give her that. Instead, I accelerated the drift. The next morning, I left the house without a word. No coffee, no breakfast together, no acknowledging her as she walked into the kitchen in that robe she thought still had power over me. I was already in my car, halfway down the street, before she even realized I'd gone. I started filling my evenings. Not with people she knew, but with people she'd never met. Old colleagues, gym acquaintances, neighbors she'd ignored. I made sure she couldn't predict where I was or who I was with. When she asked, I answered with one word: out. Her curiosity turned to suspicion. And suspicion, for someone like her, is poison. One night, I came home to find the dining table set, a meal laid out like something from our early years. She stood there, waiting for me to say something. I sat down, ate in silence, and left the dishes where they were. She tried again the next day, this time with an offer to go away for the weekend. Somewhere just us, she said. I told her I was busy, didn't explain with what. The truth was, I'd already begun building my escape in plain sight. Documents moved to a safe place. Important items taken out of the house. My name coming off things she assumed I'd always manage: utilities, insurance, even the lease on her car. And through it all, I kept the same calm, measured presence. No fights, no accusations, no giving her the satisfaction of knowing which move would be my last. Because the day she found out I was gone wasn't going to be the day I packed my things. It was going to be the day she realized I'd been leaving for months. By the third week, the silence wasn't just a gap in conversation, it was an atmosphere. You could feel it pressing in from the walls. She had stopped trying to bait me with charm. Now she was probing for signs of weakness. Casual remarks dropped like fishing lines, hoping I'd bite. I didn't. Her first real slip came on a Tuesday. I was in the garage, tightening the bolts on the shelves, when she appeared in the doorway. She leaned there like she used to when she wanted to talk, but there was no softness in her eyes, only calculation. She mentioned she was thinking of going out with friends this weekend, watching me closely for any reaction. I just nodded and went back to my work. That answer, or lack of one, threw her off. Because she wasn't really asking for permission. She was testing to see if I'd still care enough to object. 2 days later, I saw the proof of where she'd gone. Not because I followed her. Because people talk, even when you don't ask. A photo from a friend of a friend's social media popped up in my feed. Her, at a rooftop bar, laughing like I hadn't seen in years. A man's hand rested casually at her lower back, just in frame. Not conclusive, but telling. I didn't save it. I didn't mention it. I didn't need to. Instead, I began removing the invisible scaffolding she'd been leaning on for years. The small, uncredited tasks that kept her life running smoothly. Her car service appointment? Canceled. The housekeeper? Let go. The joint account she used for miscellaneous expenses? Reduced to a balance that wouldn't cover a weekend away. She noticed. Not because she asked, she never asked, but because suddenly things weren't working the way they always had. The air in the tires low. The laundry piling up. Her favorite skincare box missing from the mail. She didn't confront me directly. She complained to others. I know because one of those others told me. A neighbor mentioned she'd been talking about how distant I'd become, how I was withdrawing like a punishment. I smiled and let him believe it. The truth was, I wasn't punishing her. I was unhooking myself from a role she thought I'd play forever. Every night, I kept moving small pieces of my life into a locked case in the garage, documents, a few valuables, even certain clothes. She never noticed. She was too busy checking my phone when I wasn't looking, too busy trying to read my face for signs of jealousy. But I didn't give her any. Because the moment she realized she'd lost control over me, the game would be over. And I wasn't done playing. Not yet. The first open crack appeared on a Sunday morning. I was in the kitchen, making coffee for one, when she came downstairs wearing that too bright smile, the one that didn't reach her eyes. She asked if I wanted to join her for brunch with some friends. I said I already had plans. I didn't. Her expression tightened just enough to betray the hit. She covered it with a shrug and busied herself at the fridge, but I'd seen it. That split second where she realized my schedule no longer revolved around hers. By now, my life outside of her was deliberate. I'd started reconnecting with people I hadn't spoken to in years. Old friends, colleagues, gym acquaintances. Not to confide in them, not to tell my story, but to build a network that didn't include her name anywhere. Every new connection was another thread cut from the net she thought held me. She started fishing harder for information, asking where I'd been, who I'd seen. I kept my answers vague, short. The less detail, the louder her imagination worked against her. Midweek, I came home to find her sitting on the couch, phone in hand, her posture stiff. She asked if I could help her fix the Wi-Fi. I told her she'd have to call the provider. I walked past without slowing. That small refusal landed harder than any argument could have. She was used to me fixing everything, glitches, leaks, any disruption in the comfort she took for granted. Now, each time she reached for that version of me, her hand closed on air. I'd also started redirecting mail, quietly changing billing addresses for accounts she didn't know existed, moving statements to digital only, setting up a P.O. box. My name was disappearing from our shared paper trail, and she didn't even know it yet. But the more I withdrew, the more she circled. She began offering olive branches, cooking meals, making small talk, even trying to reminisce about our early years. I responded politely, but without warmth. One night, she tried a different tactic. She sat across from me at the table, leaned in slightly, and asked if we were okay. I looked her in the eye and said, "I'm fine." Then I went back to my food. It wasn't cruelty. It was clarity. I was showing her that I didn't need to fight to prove I'd already left her in every way that mattered. Because what she didn't understand, and what I wasn't going to explain, was that I wasn't working on the marriage anymore. I was working on the exit. And exits are best made in silence. By the fourth week, the house no longer felt like ours. It felt like a waiting room. Everything was still in place, but nothing belonged to both of us anymore. She must have felt it too, because her approach shifted again. Less cold detachment, more forced normalcy. She started acting like she wanted to reset things, asking if I wanted to watch something together, suggesting we go out for dinner, laughing at things that weren't funny. It was performance, and I'd seen enough of those to recognize the signs. I kept my responses minimal. A nod here, a polite, maybe later there. The less I gave her, the more obvious her effort became. And the more obvious it became, the more desperate it looked. One night, I walked in late from the gym to find her waiting at the table with 2 glasses of wine poured. She gestured toward the seat across from her and said, "Thought we could just talk." I looked at the glasses, then at her, and told her I was heading to bed. Her smile froze before she masked it. But I caught that microsecond of disappointment. That was the real her, the part that hated not being in control. Behind the scenes, my exit plan was almost complete. My essentials were already moved to storage. The accounts I wanted untouched were secure. My legal and financial paperwork was in order. All that remained was the moment. I wanted her to believe, right until the end, that she still had a chance to pull me back in. The sharper the contrast, the harder the fall. 2 days later, she tried a different angle, jealousy. She made a casual remark about how I'd been out a lot lately and asked if there was someone else. I just smiled and said, "There's a lot you don't know." I didn't confirm. I didn't deny. I let the ambiguity settle in her mind like a splinter she couldn't reach. That night, she lingered near me in the kitchen longer than necessary, finding excuses to touch my arm, to stand close. I stepped away each time without acknowledging the contact. It was the same rejection she had once perfected, now mirrored back at her without a single word. By then, I wasn't just detached. I was studying her the way you study a room you're about to leave, quietly noting what to take, what to leave behind, and what will simply stop existing in your life the moment you walk out the door. And in that silence, I realized something. She was no longer my wife. She was just the last obstacle between me and freedom. The first sign she knew something irreversible was coming happened on a Thursday night. I walked in from work, and the house smelled like her old perfume, one she hadn't worn in years. She was in the kitchen, dressed like she had somewhere to be, but she wasn't going anywhere. She turned when she heard me, smiled like we were still in our first year together, and said she'd made my favorite dinner. I sat, ate, and thanked her. That was all. No nostalgia. No opening for her to slip into the role of the loving wife she had long since abandoned. Halfway through the meal, she asked if I thought things were getting better. I took a sip of water, set the glass down, and told her, "They're getting clearer." She didn't ask what I meant. She didn't have to. By now, every inch of the house felt like a stage. Her movements, her words, even her silences, none of it was casual. Everything was placed with intention, as if the right performance could rewind the clock. I kept my role consistent, calm, polite, unreachable. That weekend, she tried again. Suggested we take a trip, just the two of us, to get away from everything. I told her I had other plans. I didn't elaborate. The less detail, the more her mind filled in the blanks, and the more she realized she no longer knew what my life looked like. Meanwhile, the last pieces of my plan clicked into place. My name came off the mortgage. My insurance policies were separate. My new place, small, quiet, entirely mine, was ready. I'd even changed my work schedule slightly, just enough to create hours in the day she couldn't account for. I didn't hide it, but I didn't explain it either. Her mood started shifting in ways she couldn't mask. Shorter temper, quicker to snap, more suspicious questions disguised as casual conversation. She began watching me the way someone watches a door they know is about to open, unsure if they can stop what's coming through it. The truth was, she couldn't. One night, I caught her in the garage, standing near the storage case where I'd been moving my things. She stepped back when she saw me, muttered something about looking for the broom, and left quickly. She knew. Maybe not the details, but she could feel it, the inevitability. And still, I gave her nothing to hold on to. Because the final move had to come without warning. The moment she thought I was still in the room, I'd already be gone. The night before I left, the house was unnaturally quiet. She'd been circling me all evening, hovering in doorways, starting conversations that went nowhere. It was the kind of restless energy you only see when someone senses the ground shifting beneath them. Around 10, she came into the living room with 2 mugs of tea. She set one down in front of me and sat on the edge of the couch, close enough that I could smell her perfume again. She said she'd been thinking about us and wanted to know if we could start fresh. I looked at her for a long moment. Not to consider it. My decision had been made weeks ago, but to memorize the way she looked when she finally asked for something she couldn't have. I told her I'd think about it. She seemed relieved. That was the point. She went to bed before me, satisfied with the idea that she'd made progress. I stayed up, not watching TV, not reading, just letting the minutes pass. When the clock hit midnight, I stood, walked to the garage, and loaded the last of my things into the trunk. The documents, the safe, the case I'd been filling piece by piece. I didn't take everything. Only what was mine, what mattered. The rest could stay. She'd wake up and see a house that looked almost the same, until she noticed the absences. In the morning, I left before sunrise. No note. No explanations. My key on the counter, nothing else. I didn't slam the door. I didn't even close it hard. By the time she woke up, I was already across town, unlocking the door to my new place. It was small, bare, quiet, and it was mine. My phone started buzzing mid-morning, calls, texts, all from her. First confused, then urgent. I didn't answer. By noon, the messages shifted tone. Accusations. Demands. One word, please. I let them stack up, unread. She would go through the stages. Confusion, anger, bargaining. But none of them would bring me back. Because the truth was, I hadn't left her that morning. I'd been leaving for months, step by calculated step. She just hadn't noticed until the door closed for the last time. And when it did, there was nothing dramatic about it. No final fight. No explosive confrontation. Just absence. The kind of silence that doesn't wait for you to break it. The kind that tells you, without a single word, that you are no longer part of the story. She didn't stop calling for 3 days. At first, the messages came every hour, some angry, some pleading, some pretending nothing had happened at all. By the second day, they slowed, but the tone changed. She sent photos of places we'd been, old inside jokes, even a picture of the cat sleeping on my old side of the bed. It was bait. I didn't bite. By the 3rd day, the messages stopped. That's when I knew the reality had set in. Silence works both ways. It's a weapon, but it's also a mirror. And she was finally hearing her own reflection. I didn't block her. I didn't need to. My absence was permanent, and she understood it. That was enough. In the weeks that followed, mutual friends reached out. Some just checking in, others fishing for details. I kept it brief. I told them nothing that would invite her back into the conversation. She could tell her version to anyone who'd listen, but I wouldn't be in it. The first time I saw her after leaving wasn't planned. It was at a grocery store, of all places. She froze when she spotted me. I didn't. I nodded once, polite, and kept walking. No stopping. No catching up. No giving her a single opening. I knew that moment would replay in her head later. The realization that I wasn't avoiding her out of anger. I simply didn't need her in my life anymore. Meanwhile, my own life took shape quickly. The quiet of my new place felt like oxygen. My mornings were mine again. My evenings had no tension, no calculated silences, just peace. I reconnected with people I'd lost touch with. I took back old hobbies. I remembered what it felt like to live without the constant undercurrent of someone else's control. There was no grand speech to mark the end. No final declaration. Just a clean break, maintained by discipline. And that's the part most people don't understand. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is no revenge at all. It's not proving a point. It's not making them see what they lost. It's building a life so far removed from theirs that they can't even find the edges of it. She once told me, "You'll get intimacy when I feel like it." Those words had been her way of saying she owned the pace of our connection. But in the end, I took back something far greater. Access. Now she has none. And the silence she once controlled? It belongs to me. Forever. Drop it in the comments. Hit subscribe. This is where we talk about what doesn't get forgiven.